Hey, greetings, everybody. I am here with my friends Deacon Seraphim Rohlin and Matthew Namee, whom you've seen both of them on my channel and various other things I've done before. And today we're going to be talking about the future. We're going to be staring into well, we're not diviners, so we don't have an actual crystal ball or palantir or anything like that. We're, studying the innards of some slaughtered animal. But we're going to be looking to the future, making some predictions, some speculations, asking what will American Orthodox Christianity look like in the year 2040? So that's just 15 years into the future. And it might kind of surprise you that Deacon Seraphim is with us to have this conversation. If you've watched any of my conversations with Matthew before, you know that this is definitely par for the course for this guy. But what you do not know probably about Deacon Seraphim is that he actually turns out to be a data scientist.
By vocation. I mean, this is what I've done to feed my family for my entire adult life.
This is his day job. And so he works with Matthew at the Orthodox Studies Institute, which is part of St. Constantine College in Houston, and they collect and analyze data on Orthodox Christianity. There's a constant flow of this data and analyzing it. And there's been work being done on this now for months, maybe well over a year, I would say, maybe 2 years. I'm not sure. And so what we're going to be discussing today is some of the findings from this mountain of data. And I think you're going to be fascinated. You're going to be encouraged. And frankly, you're also going to be a little bit worried and maybe shocked at certain moments in this conversation. So welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Deacon Seraphim. Let's have a crazy conversation.
Let's do it.
It's great to be here. That opening theme music made me feel like I was on the evening news, though.
Did you like that? I picked that up myself.
It's nice. I was for some reason I was waiting for the Great Tales music, and so
yes. We are going to be telling some great tales today, but
yes,
this is
indeed.
all distinctly modern stuff. So, okay, well, I mean, number one, a conversation that we've all had at various points and that I talk about a lot is the convert surge. This sudden inrush of people into the Orthodox Church, particularly in the United States, but honestly, we're seeing it all over the world. But we should mention that our conversation today is about the United States. This is about Orthodox Christianity in America. So, the convert surge, I mean, has it let up? Is it still happening? What's going on? Is this still a thing?
Yeah. So as I think a lot of clergy around the U.S. could tell you, the convert surge has not slowed down. In fact, we are experiencing now what Matthew and I at least believe to be not a continuation of the sort of the COVID surge, but more of a second wave or a second surge. And it's really interesting demographically. It's very different from the COVID surge. So I think it might be good to start by talking about some of that and talking about the things that we're seeing. As I think a lot of people know, one of the many hats that I wear is I'm one of the catechists at my parish here in Dallas, where we have currently about 65 people on a Sunday in our catechumen and inquirers class. So this is a lot for us. I mean, when I say that, keep in mind that just 3 or 4 years ago, having 20 or 30 people in that class would have been really extraordinary. So there really is something happening right now, and it's awesome. I'm going to say a lot of things today, and some of them will sound a little daunting, but I just want to iterate that I'm a very optimistic person, and this is the Lord's church. And he is seeing fit to build it in certain ways, and it's up to us as his hands and feet in whatever capacity God has called us to serve in that. And so it's been my great joy to be involved in catechesis at my home parish. Yeah. And what I would say is that whereas with the COVID surge, we were seeing a lot of young men, in particular young single men. What we're seeing now is something that's it's much more varied demographically. We have a lot of young families. In fact, I would say predominantly young families, especially young families with 2 to 3 children. We're seeing a lot of young couples coming in the part of the country that I live and serve in right now. We are having a lot of Hispanics and African Americans as well coming into the church. Not the majority, but it is now pronounced enough that we can definitely say, at least where I live, that it is a trend.
Yeah, and it's not just where you live. I mean, all over the country, in places, as varied as, Washington State, New York City, like all over the United States, we're hearing this similar story, especially this sort of unusual, surprising uptick in Hispanic inquirers coming in. I mean, this seems to be just a very recent development.
Yeah,
but it's across the country.
As you both know, I travel a decent amount and give retreats at various churches, and anecdotally, I'm seeing this continue everywhere. I was just in Reno, Nevada this last weekend. So if there's anybody in the chat that was there, thanks for coming out. And I met multiple people with Hispanic backgrounds there, and I was at the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Anthony there in Reno, and it's an extremely multi-ethnic, multicultural church, and was quite full on Sundays. So as I mentioned, we actually, this is the first time on my YouTube channel that I've gone live. So hey, everybody in the live chat, I see a bunch of people very active there. And if you have a question, feel free to sound off there. But actually right now, I'd like you to just tell me, if you're an Orthodox Christian, is your parish seeing a surge? Is it continuing in your parish? We'd like to, just sound off just so we can get some sense from the live chat of exactly what's going on there.
I'm very much a hard numbers guy, at least when it comes to this stuff. And unfortunately, this new surge is just too recent for us to have hard numbers on. But I can tell you from the own records that I've been keeping, at least in Dallas, the demographics are something like 25% former Roman Catholics, about 50% former Protestant of some kind, and about 25% totally unchurched of some kind. Sometimes that means a neo-pagan background. Sometimes that means somebody who might have gone to church or been baptized as a child, but has never been to church before. But basically was not a practicing Christian of any kind before they walked in the door of St. Seraphim.
I'm looking at the chat right now, and it's just boom, 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 boom. All these people saying, yes, here. Yes, we're seeing it here. Yes, lots of young families. And I have to say, I was very amused. Father Thomas Soroka has joined us, another Ancient Faith Radio live show host. Glad to have you. And he said that he was promised flying cars, since we're talking about the future. That was 25 years ago, Father. It was the year 2000 that we were promised flying cars by, Avery Brooks hoping for it.
We did get those hover surfboard things, but just the worst version of them. So.
I noticed Everett's workshop says our church is exploding. We have had to go to 2 liturgies. Thankfully, we have 2 altars and priests now. This is even after we started a mission parish.
Oh boy, we're gonna talk a lot more about that in a minute, Avery.
Okay.
I got things to say about that. The last thing I would just say about the current surge, Father, is that one of the metrics that we can positively look at. So OSI we have regular clergy surveys that we conduct with clergy around the country, and one of the things that we can kind of positively say is that parishes are not reporting the same kind of summer drop-offs this last year that we would normally expect to see. Wild. So typically speaking, you have a bunch of people that show up for Pascha, and then summer vacations and so on happen, and your attendance drops by maybe 20 or 30%, and then it picks up again, usually in the fall, going into Christmas. That didn't happen this year. And so we have parishes reporting numbers that are Pascha level or above throughout the summer, which is technically the off season.
Nuts. I wanted to also highlight, I see there one of my fellow Antiochian priests, Father Thomas Zane, who is the Vicar General of the Antiochian Archdiocese. So he serves in Brooklyn at the cathedral that was founded by St. Raphael of Brooklyn. And he says that even in New York City, they're seeing this. He says we have around 50 recent converts or acquirers at present. And I think that's particularly notable because a lot of the talk about, converts for many, many years now, actually, has largely been kind of in the South and in the West, and that the Northeast has been slow at best. And yet it's happening, it seems, just about everywhere, geographically. Not every single parish, but geographically, there's stuff going on almost everywhere.
There are places in Pennsylvania, upstate New York, like the old school American Orthodox heartland that's been, kind of declining demographically and economically for a long time. And you hear about parishes closing and this kind of thing. And now we're hearing in those places, there are parishes that were sort of on the brink of collapse, or they were sort of in the doldrums, and now they're booming and they're setting attendance records and this kind of thing. So yeah, it is amazing because it's not limited to a particular region. I mean, we're definitely seeing it in the South and West, but Northeast, rural Pennsylvania. I mean, all over the place. We're getting.
I'm seeing a priest in Central New York State. Central New York State. This is not an area that we normally associate with big swarms of converts, and yet here we are.
The chat is amazing, by the way.
Yeah,
all the anecdotal information that's coming in. This is great.
I know.
By the way,
as a data scientist, I have to imagine you're sitting there like writing notes.
Well,
on this anecdotal
the thing is that there are methods, including some that I've developed. There are actual methods for taking anecdotal information and turning it into hard numbers. And so
that's right.
I will definitely want a log of the chat later. But one of the things that that I'll just say. I mean, we're going to look at a regional picture of things here in a little bit. But there are 3 states, Pennsylvania and New York are 2 of them, that are in that kind of old Northeast corridor, but are, despite the fact that population growth has become very sluggish in those states the last 15 years or last 25 years, they are actually still, like, Orthodoxy is still kind of punching above its weight. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, lots of good news and lots of scary stuff. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I mean, for a long time, I mean, I don't even remember a time when I wasn't hearing about Christianity declining in the United States. I mean, everything we read, like, for instance, if you follow the religious sociologist Ryan Burge, who does amazing work, he's constantly saying, yes, there's some interesting things going on, but let's look at the hard numbers. Gen Z, the Zoomers, are majority now non-Christian or close to that. So, yeah, maybe there's something going on for the Orthodox right now, but with so much loss going on at the same time, and I think this is an interesting thing worth pointing out, because I've seen, like Matthew, for instance, you've pointed out some of these numbers on Twitter. I've seen this, and some people have actually ridiculed you, saying, "Oh, he's saying that there's no growth in Orthodoxy in America, and yet look at all these people saying that there's these massive growth in some of these parishes." So, I mean, what gives? Like, is it possible to have big loss and big growth at the same time? And are we seeing a net? Is there a net change?
So during the post-COVID, even a year or two ago, I was kind of a naysayer about net growth. I was sort of like, hold on, everybody. I'm not sure that we're having net growth. Yes, we're having a massive flood of converts coming in, but we're also losing a lot of people. There are a lot of people who dropped out during COVID as well. Right. And so I was sort of cautious about saying that we have net growth. My thinking was, I think we're treading water, kind of, maybe a little bit of net growth, but not net a huge boom, because we have kind of, credits and debits, right?
Yeah.
I no longer think that that's the case. I think that what we're hypothesizing is a second surge, is now resulting in, I don't have the hard numbers yet, but I think we're actually seeing significant net growth now.
Yeah.
I think Orthodoxy is genuinely booming, and we're totally bucking the trend of society. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing that a lot of people may not know, particularly because there's so much energy in Orthodoxy, like in the South and the West of the U.S., is that there are regions where that energy there are little spikes here and there, right? I'll give you an example. So I live in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, which is south of like Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. That's where St. Alexis, was headquartered there in Wilkes-Barre. And of course, everybody knows Scranton because of the office. That region has dozens of Orthodox churches. There are dozens of Orthodox churches north of me. There's just piles and piles of them. And the reason why they're all there is because of the many, particularly the Slavs, who moved in the late 19th, early 20th century to work in the coal mines. Well, with the degradation of the coal industry, it's just not as important as it used to be in terms of generating power. Those areas have become depopulated. Scranton at one time was the richest city in America. That's why it was the electric city. It was the first city to be lit up with electric lights. And it's definitely not that way now. Like, it's just not in very good shape compared to where it used to be. And so as a result, there are multiple churches there that are either on the verge of closing or have recently closed. A number of them that share one priest between 3 or 4 parishes. And I tell this to people sometimes, you know, that I connect with on the internet, and they're like, how can that be? It's like, well, that's because, you know, for a long period now, before these surges, the growth has been largely in the South and the West. And, you know, it's been decades since some regions that formerly had a huge Orthodox population have really had economic vitality. Now, I do know of a couple parishes in northeastern Pennsylvania that are bucking the trend, but generally speaking, the trend in NEPA is not great. Is not great. And so when we're talking about loss and gain happening at the same time, sometimes that loss and gain is happening in different parts of the country. And unless you're connected with all those different parts of the country, you're not going to see that. You're just going to see, you know, or see people are not going to be posting excitedly on Twitter about how their church is dying. They're going to be posting about how it's exploding.
You have jurisdictional differences too. There are some jurisdictions that are drawing in all these converts, right? And there are some that just aren't, because they're maybe more focused on a particular ethnic, cultural preservation, et cetera, and they're not going to be as kind of convert oriented. And that's, so there are haves and have-nots.
Let me also address, there's some good questions in the chat, particularly from Gareth Boyd, where he's asking, are converts surging at a greater rate than second and third gen cradles are dropping off? So something that's interesting is we actually know basically what the drop-off rate for cradle Orthodox is in America.
Okay.
We actually know that. Not only do we know that, but we're actually kind of working on right now and trying to raise funding for a study that we're going to do that will be the most detailed cross-sectional study of cradle Orthodox that's ever been done in this country or probably any other country, and in which we're going to be, you know, hopefully actually analyzing a lot of things about, you know, when people leave, why do they leave, you know, and all those various factors.
So that raises this question, which I think probably a number of people who are always skeptical whenever these conversations are had might be wondering about, which is, okay, where is this data coming from? You say we know, for instance, what the retention rate is. Yeah. Well, how do we know? Like, where are we reading this?
Do you want to take that one, Matthew?
So for the retention rate,
yeah,
I can take it. Yeah, for the retention rate question, there are, so the most notable would be Pew, the Religious Landscape Survey, but there are others. There are lots of little surveys that survey where they ask someone about their current religion, and then they'll ask about their childhood religion, like what religion were you raised in? So we can look at those data points and see, okay, how many people said they were raised Orthodox? Of those who said they were raised Orthodox, how many said at the time of the survey that they were still Orthodox? And that gives us an estimate of, you know, what is the retention rate. And what we found is that across a whole bunch of different data sets, the numbers kind of converge at around 60% retention. So we're losing like 4 out of 10.
Yeah, it's like 64%. It's about 64% retention, which is actually better than most religious groups. It's not great. As a dad, you know, with 6 kids, I don't like that. But you know, so it's something we got to work on. But so we have those numbers. One of the things that we've been doing at OSI is actually trying to bring together data from a lot of disparate sources and sort of make adjustments based on you know, methodology and things like that. Obviously, some like their survey methods are basically skewed to certain demographics. So if you have like an online survey, you're always going to get a younger crowd. If you do a mail survey or a phone call, you're always going to get an older crowd, just as a simple example. So what we've been able to do is bring together enough of these surveys and compare them that we feel like we can say certain things with a fair amount of certainty. So one of the important sources when we're talking about the growth of Orthodoxy in America right now, obviously anecdotally, we know there's lots of young people. Well, how many young people and what demographic are they? So one of our best resources for this, we published a report a few weeks ago called New Data on American Orthodox College Students, which Matthew and I wrote together, and you can go look that up if you're curious.
And where would people find that?
Yeah.
OrthodoxStudies.org.
Yeah.
OrthodoxStudies.org. Yeah. So what we found in this survey, which is it is a broad spectrum survey that is done of about 60,000 American college students, which is a very statistically significant number. That's a good sample. that about 1.37% of them were self-identified as Orthodox Christians. And this is much higher than the, for instance, basically 0.5% of Gen Xers. So this basically means that there's some other annual surveys of college students out there, like those conducted by the Higher Education Research Institute at UCLA, which found 1.1% of their respondents. And that's not too far off from the FIRE number. And basically, if we take all of these different college studies that have been performed together, we can very confidently and probably a little conservatively say that about 1% of Gen Z is Orthodox, as opposed to about 5% of 0.5% of Gen X. And that doesn't sound like a lot. I know it doesn't sound like a lot. I do not like, the thing is, like, when you say people are skeptical, I'm people. You know, my job as an analyst really is to always look at these things with a great amount of skepticism. And Matthew and Father Andrew, you're in some of those conversations as well, will tell you I'm always the person in the room like, but we can't quite say that, you know. But the reason so that nobody is saying Orthodoxy is anywhere close to being headed to be a majority religion in this country.
We're not taking over America.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It would
let's just throw a little bit of water on that. Okay.
And let me just be very clear, we could not handle that. Like we we're going to talk about scaling issues here in a little bit, if even if that was something we wanted to do, we simply could not do it right now, barring some kind of like true miracle, which obviously you can't rule out. But please understand, 1% of Gen Z being Orthodox is huge, and it means there is a trend going on among young people. And so roughly about so if you look at college graduate information, you've got that means there's probably about there's 16 million students enrolled as undergraduates in U.S. colleges. 1% of those are Orthodox. Maybe 1.5% of them are Orthodox. For comparison, only about 15% are Roman Catholic. Compare that to an older demographic in America, which is 20% Catholic. Catholicism is trending generally down among younger people, where most surveys tend to estimate that the Catholic share of the U.S. population is about 19 to 25%. So, in other words, compared to the average American, Orthodox students are notably less likely to be Catholic than their parents' generation. But far
Gen Z.
more likely,
talking
Gen
about
Gen
Z is
but far more likely to be Orthodox than their parents' generation. Now, if we look more broadly at anybody just identifying as Christian, Pew has 62% of Americans identify themselves as some kind of Christian. But among Gen Z, that number is probably about 43%. So Gen Z in general is becoming less religious, but Orthodoxy is bucking the trend. And even though the share is small, it has a larger share of Gen Z than it does of previous generations. And so another thing you can do, FIRE has their mega data set now available, where you can basically pull down historical data from their surveys the last 5 years. And that shows Orthodoxy is up by basically 0.5% over the last 5 years, which is, again, a really significant change to our overall share of the population. Protestants, for example, have decreased by almost 6%, which is half the share of self-identifying Protestants among college students, among Gen Z. They were at 12%, now they're at 6%. Roman Catholics have also been on a general downward trend, although they did have a pretty good 2% rebound in 2024 to 2025. So it'll be interesting to see if that holds as a trend. I'm very interested in that and maybe trying to figure out why that is, but that's a different conversation. So all that to say, high level, you could say something like 0.69% maybe of Americans are Orthodox. But 1 to 1.5% of Gen Z are Orthodox. And that's we're the only religion in America which is trending in that direction.
Wow. That's it's hard to know where that's going to go, Well, the Christianity, so we could say that Christianity generally is shrinking in America, but it's becoming more Orthodox.
Yes.
Although, I mean, again,
Yeah, very small
much,
percentage, very, very small percentage. I mean, one way to kind of think about it is as a, it's a surge, but also at a larger societal level, it may be something like a resorting. So you have people who are just not pious Christians at all, just leaving totally, and people who are more, engaged with their faith are moving in the direction of Orthodoxy, except that about 25% of our catechumens are coming from like totally unchurched backgrounds. So it's not just a reshuffle. It's not just a reshuffle of Christians.
When I was in Reno this last weekend, I don't know hardly anything about that part of the country. It was my first time in Nevada. And as my father admonished me, I did not go there and shoot a man just to watch him die.
Probably a good call.
Good call. But I spoke with one of the things that is out in that part of the world is this Burning Man festival that happens nearby. And which in my mind, I've never thought much about Burning Man.
It's the first ever ancient faith Burning Man live stream.
That's probably true, actually. But anyway, one of the things that I learned, because I'd heard people say things like this about Burning Man, but I'd never really looked into it or got anything serious. I met people who were part of Burning Man and were there doing neo-pagan rituals together in large groups, And in fact, I met a couple that they met each other through this. They met each other through doing some kind of ritual together. And they got together and got married and had a daughter. And so I asked them, they're Orthodox Christians now. And I asked them, I said, well, I mean, what changed for you? Like, why did you decide to become Christian? Because they were definitely very self-consciously not Christians when they were doing these neo-pagan practices. And the father in the couple, he said to me, our daughter. I looked at my daughter and I realized that we had to live a different way. And so I'm hearing it's fascinating to me. It used to be decades ago, you would almost never meet anyone in the Orthodox Church with a neo-pagan background, and now I meet them all the time. So you've got neo-pagans, you've got people who are just raised with no religion at all, or maybe they remember when they were very, very young, their parents brought them to church, but then that was it. They kind of ran out of steam really early. And so, I think that there is a sorting going on, that the people who are serious Christians some of them are moving into Orthodox Christianity, but also that as kind of the general societal narrative is breaking down and there's not some clear normal thing to be or to think or to do or to be part of, that people are encountering the Orthodox Church and seeing this very coherent way of living. And it's fascinating to me, actually, in talking with a lot of the newer converts, is that the journeys are often do not have a strong intellectual component. I mean, certainly we meet those people still. Like I studied, I learned, I believed, but many people, it's like, I came here and this was home, this was family, this was sane, this was full, this was, something I could really live into for the rest of my life. And I think that because of the way a lot of people have a feeling that society has gone in this kind of just sort of evacuated narrative, like there is no narrative. And I think that probably is a significant piece of what is driving what we're seeing, and why particularly we're seeing in this second spike of the surge so many young families. Because a family, if a single person can kind of say, well, I don't know really what I'm doing with my life, I'll figure it out someday. If you're a mom or a dad, you better have that figured out.
Hmm.
We're also seeing, at least again, anecdotally, but I mean, it seems to be a thing. I'd be interested to hear in the chat if people have experienced this in their parish, where a young person will come to Orthodoxy and then bring their family with them.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. We have several cases of that in my parish right now, where it's like
any such cases.
It's like the 17-year-old boy or it's the teenage girl or whatever. She becomes interested, and then her parents say, well, we want to support you, we're going to go along with you, and then they show up and it's very beautiful and they're drawn to it and they find Christ there and they stay, and glory to God for such parents. And for such children.
So, I mean, speaking of parents and kids, I mean, do we have any indications that Orthodox Christians are, frankly, more fertile than are we literally reproducing for the next generation? I mean, what's happening?
So this is this is one of those things where the news is not great in certain regards.
Okay.
And that is that of all the religious groups in North America, pretty much only the Muslims are reproducing at replacement rates. Now that's based off of a survey of basically an older population. And so that's part of the difficulty here, because we know anecdotally that many of the people who are drawn to the Orthodox Church also tend to be the kinds of people who are, let's say, drawn to having lots of children. I think between the three of us here, we have 17 children. So,
and I'm the one with very few compared to the two of y'all. And I've got 4, which a lot of people consider to be a big family.
That's right. You know? So it's a little hard to say in that regard. I think this is one of the areas where a more detailed study is needed. And this is one of the things that I would actually like to do with OSI, would be to be a more detailed study on fertility in Orthodoxy, especially by region. I have a sense that probably some regions it's more prevalent than others, but yeah, this is an area where we still don't know as much as we'd like to know. But even just assuming the normal American population growth rate or lack thereof also applies to us, Orthodoxy in 15 years is about to get interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about some projections, right? Given everything we've just said, what does the Orthodox Christian population in the United States look like in 2040? Man, I keep talking about that, and I realize I will be 65 in that year.
The thing is, you're like 2040. That's so far away. Oh,
I know.
Oh no,
sorry,
it's not.
I have to flash my Gen X card here.
Yeah,
since I've got
So I'm gonna paint two different pictures, two different scenarios for y'all, and one is a very conservative estimate. It assumes that the surge is happening and at some point it levels off. And then the other is a slightly more aggressive, although I think, again, I'm always the naysayer in the room, so I feel like my projections both are probably pretty conservative, but another one assumes that we maintain our current rate of growth into Gen Alpha and Gen Beta. So those are the two scenarios that I want to give you. So scenario number one is that by 2040 we have 2.77 million Orthodox Christians. And this is pretty light in the sense that it assumes that Gen Z maintains a 1% Orthodox rate, which we might already be above that Gen Alpha and Gen Beta also stabilize at 1%, that older generation like Boomers and Gen Xers maintain the current sort of 0.49% rate, and then Millennials show about a 0.7% rate, which is where my generation is at. Now, if that's all that happens, so we just kind of level out right where we are, and then we keep having babies and growing our families and maintaining things, by 2040, there's 2.77 million Orthodox Christians in America. That's a 69% increase from our current population.
Wow.
So that's about 1.113 million more Orthodox Christians. If our current parish density, by the way, and this is just this is the average, because in actuality, there are jurisdictions that have 800 to 900 families per parish, and then there are jurisdictions that have like 100 families per parish. This is a different discussion to talk about, but on average, we have 233 families per parish in America right now. So just to keep that rate, that means over the next 15 years, planting 1,385 new parishes.
Which, we'll talk about this, but
yes,
is almost certainly not going to happen.
Well, I mean, we'll see.
I'm just saying.
We'll see.
We'll get there.
That's kind of why we're having this conversation, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
We need
see,
to we let him finish, but then the whole point is this is kind of big, guys.
Yeah. So again, this is a conservative scenario in which we just basically let's say net growth stops and we maintain what we have for the next 15 years, and our population grows at the same rate as the rest of the American population. We're looking at, we need 1,300 new parishes. That's what we're looking at, 15 years. Current rate of growth, if the current rate of growth holds, and this is still these are pretty conservative numbers, I think, but we're looking at maybe about 3.52 million Orthodox Christians by 2040. So to break that down, this would be Gen Z grows to 1.2. We stabilize somewhere at like a 1.2 percent share of Gen Z by 2040, 1.5% of Gen Alpha, 1.4% of Gen Beta, millennials up to 8.8%, and older generations maintain the current 0.5%. So those numbers are a little more aggressive, but it wouldn't really take much to get us there. That's a 115% increase from what we have today. That would be 1.88 million new Orthodox Christians in the next 15 years to keep our current density of parishes. That would be 2,305 parishes that we
have fewer than that today. We don't have that many parishes.
Yeah, we currently have just over 2,000 parishes. So we need to basically double the number of parishes that we have in the next 15 years if current growth rates continue. And that would basically put us at a 1.02% population percentage of the population of the United States. So we'd be right at 1% at that point.
Wow.
So that's two potential pictures. The most conservative version of which is, if we just keep take the increase that God has given us, and to me this is really a stewardship question. David says, "Except the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain, who build it." And so, unless it's God's work and God's church, then it just doesn't really matter what we do. But if it is God's work and God's church, then it's up to us all, clergy, laymen, whatever you are, whatever state you find yourself in, to do what you can with the tools that you've been given. I'm a data scientist, so this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But this is even at the most kind of conservative aspect of it, it's really good news. And the bad news is that if we don't rise to the occasion, people show up, and the number one factor, I can just tell you this anecdotally, Father Andrew, you were a pastor, this. The number one factor that really determines whether or not somebody actually stays in a parish is going to basically be, do they get one-on-one time with clergy, and do they get plugged in with the families in the parish? In other words, can this be a life for them? It can't just be, because eventually the ooh, cool, woo is going to wear off. And
that's right.
So if we're not prepared to kind of minister to these people as they come in, then they'll kind of come in one door and out the other. And that's always the fear whenever we talk about this stuff. That's always the fear, is how much of that is happening right now.
Yeah, I mean that happens. I was going to say that frankly happens a lot in the mega churches. And of course, when we say mega church, most people have in mind, a non-denom with like a band on stage. But let's be honest, many Catholic churches in the United States are mega churches that have literally thousands of families.
Yeah.
And many of those people have never met their priest.
That's right.
And certainly a lot of non-denom, attenders have never met their pastor, never met him at all. And I was going to say, when you said, well, my job in all this is as a data scientist, I was thinking, well, my job is to make this problem worse.
By being an evangelist. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. But okay. So now that we've struck a little bit of a dire note here. Matthew, you and I'm
actually incredibly excited. I don't even feel dire about this. I'm just
this isn't the dire part. This is the good part, guys. Like Orthodoxy in America is growing at a rapid pace, and we're the one
that is actually measurable now.
Yeah, like we are the one religious group, especially the one Christian group in America, that isn't shrinking. As Gen, the older generations, the boomer generation dies off, younger generations, take their place. All these other Christian groups, the heterodox, are going to numerically decline, and Orthodoxy is going to numerically increase. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. This is really good.
We're nowhere near becoming a majority, anybody. Nowhere near.
Everybody just settle down.
Nowhere near.
No, but you know what? We that 6 million number that I keep debunking, that may be something we could get to.
Yeah, I mean, by the time Deacon Seraphim dies, that could be the reality.
In which case, we gotta build like so many new parishes. So I hope y'all are tithing.
We got to get into this because we got a lot of work to do.
Okay. Yeah. So all right. So last year, Matthew, you and I, we talked about the priest shortage crisis. The clergy crisis. It's one of the most watched videos on my channel by a lot. And we both heard directly from a lot of leaders in the church things like, We had no idea that it was this bad. We don't know what to do. What's going on? All of that kind of stuff. So are we actually producing enough clergy in order to catechize and pastor all of these people who are coming in?
No, not even close. So when I was
what do we
sounding the
need?
alarm, when I was sounding the alarm about the priest shortage last year in the report and the video we did, my numbers were entirely based on attrition. So I was looking at, okay, how many clergy are we losing on an annual basis based on retirements, deaths, in some cases deposition, because that happens at a pretty consistent rate. So how many priests are we losing? How many priests are being produced by the various programs, mainly the seminary MDiv programs? And what's the net? And we were running an attrition deficit of over 100 priests per year. That's what I found.
And that's about, just to reiterate, for those of you maybe haven't watched that video, that's about simply replacing the current clergy that we have now, serving in the churches that we have now.
Yes.
In other words, that we're not even, if we were going to put this in terms of fertility, we're like at 0.2 or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the number would be, but I think we're generating, in order to replace the current clergy, we're generating like 1/5 of the number that we actually need. Is that right?
Well, just to give you some context, the seminaries, the three main seminaries. Okay, let's focus on the three big ones: St. Vladimir's, St. Tikhon's, Holy Cross. They together combined each year graduate about 45 MDiv graduates combined, right? Now, not all of those guys go on, not all men, some of them are women, some of them are like non-Chalcedonians. So they're, how many of them actually go on to become Eastern Orthodox priests? Maybe 30 per year coming out of those programs.
Okay.
Our deficit is over 100 per year. That's the deficit. Okay. So
Wow.
You could quadruple seminary enrollment tomorrow, quadruple it, and we would still maybe be treading water on the attrition side. The problem is that's all just focusing on attrition. That's focusing on just, like you said, replacing the clergy that we have. That doesn't account for the question of growth, right? And so this is where things get really scary and catastrophic. Because when I was running those numbers, and we were surveying jurisdictions, we were surveying dioceses and so forth, we would tell them that we considered a parish to be staffed and kind of ongoing staffed if they didn't have a priest close to retirement age, right? So if you have a parish that has a 40-something-year-old priest and they've got 300 parishioners showing up every week to liturgy, right? One priest, but he's in his 40s. We considered that to be a staffed parish. It's obviously understaffed, right?
Yeah.
And if it's growing and we're getting converts and all this, it's obviously terribly understaffed. That doesn't count against that attrition deficit. Once you start accounting for the understaffing problem and the need for new missions or new parishes, new more liturgies, etc., we get into just this territory that it feels almost, I don't think it's an impossible problem, and we'll get into that, but it feels like an utterly impossible problem.
Yeah. I mean, I know about parishes where they're growing so rapidly that they have had to go from, the priest doing one-on-one catechism to whole classes, which many parishes, of course, have been doing whole classes, and maybe additional people doing catechism, deacons, like yourself, Deacon Seraphim, or lay catechists, or maybe a team, to, you were happy if there was a dozen people in that class. That was amazing. To now there are ones that it's 150 people or more. It's crazy. And like, I know personally of a parish that has grown so rapidly and it's so convert oriented, which, we all know this. Converts tend to go to confession a lot more. You know, they tend to, they're in everything a lot.
We have the numbers on that even.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. So it's just true on average. I'm not saying every single one of them, but just on average, that is true. And so when you have a church that's growing, it's not just simply scaling up in terms of the number of people doing stuff, the kind of people coming in. When you have lots of converts coming in, then that's actually going to tax the pastoral load more than simply scaling up the kind of people you already have. Right. So, for instance, I know a particular parish where the priest spends 1/4 of his working hours, 10 hours a week. Now, we all know that priests spend more than 40 hours a week, but he spends 10 hours a week hearing confessions, and you get a 10-minute appointment. You're not having a conversation about your life. It's spill it, and here's something to help you, and, you know, and that's the way that it is. That's the way that it's. So he's hearing probably 40, 50, 60 confessions a week in a year or so. He's literally hearing more confessions than I have heard as a priest in my entire priesthood, which will be 20 years next year. Not that I've been counting, but I have a general sense of about, you know, how often I was hearing confessions, how many, you know, whatever. Like if I'd hear 5 or 6 on a Saturday night, you know, sometimes I'd be like, wow, there was a decent number here today, you know. But I mean, this guy's doing 5, 6, 7 times, 8 times that every single week. So what we're talking about now is, and this is the reality, a rationing of pastoral care, that unless we begin increasing the number of clergy that we have at a much higher rate than we have now, there is not going to be any way around this. You're going to have, I mean, every pastor I have ever met in the Orthodox Church feels overworked. And the reality is it's getting worse. And when you've got this kind of growth, it's going to get even worse. And so he is going to have to start, he's already doing this, but he's going to have to start making more choices about exactly how to arrange his time so as to try to serve people and yet not cut off a lot of people at the same time. So there's pressure that's now mounting on the clergy that we currently have. And I mean, we saw in the chat people saying, we just made 20 more catechumens. We made 30 more catechumens. This parish that I was mentioning, in one Sunday, they made 50 more catechumens. They've got like 170 now or something like that. It's just unthinkable compared to most of my life for the Orthodox Church. We've never seen this kind of thing. And I mean, most clergy I talk to about this, particularly they'll say, our parish in its entire history has never had anything like this. And so we're currently just not ready. I have to just say, we're just not ready. We're not ready.
But we have to get ready. Like we just have to, you know, because the alternative, I mean, these are souls here. These are people,
human beings
that are coming to the church. Like we can't turn them away. We can't give them subpar pastoral care and sacrament rationing and this kind of garbage. Like we can't do that. So we either something is going to break catastrophically. Okay. Or we are going to have to very quickly pivot and scale up, which is going to require some outside the box thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, with that said, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back to talk about some of that out of the box thinking. Do you want to be a priest? Join us August 20th through 23rd, 2026 for the first ever vocations retreat hosted by the Antiochian Archdiocese in partnership with Ancient Faith Ministries at the Antiochian Village Conference Center in Bolivar, Pennsylvania. This retreat is for Orthodox men who are considering the vocation of priesthood within the Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese of North America. If you are trying to discern this vocation, join His Eminence Metropolitan Saba and other archdiocesan leaders for a long weekend of panel discussions, speaker sessions, church services, and socializing. You are welcome to bring along your wife, fiancé, or a supportive family member. For more information, go to ancientfaith.com/events and sign up today. Hey, welcome back. Yes, that was the most strategically placed ad ever. I mean,
nicely done. Nicely done.
Yeah,
really.
Thank you. I mean, but I mean, it's perfect because this is what we're talking about, right? So, yeah. So, okay. the seminaries are working extremely hard. It's clear. Talk to any seminary leader. They're just, they're desperate. They're desperately working hard. Kudos to them. God bless them. And God bless everyone who supports their work and donates to them, and all the faculty, the staff working at the seminaries. But there's an issue that I saw even when I was in seminary. Now, I went to seminary 20 years ago. Man, sorry, I just have to play my Gen X card one more time there. And that is, when I was in seminary, a significant majority of the men who were there, who were studying there, were from the southern U.S. and the western U.S. But the reality also was that a significant number of them were going to be going towards the Northeast, and when they graduated, right? And that's kind of an odd thing right now, because when those seminaries were founded, which was all like in the 1930s, the three major seminaries, 37, 38. I can't remember when Holy Cross was founded now off the top of my head.
Right in the same, 37 or 38.
Yeah, they were all founded within just a few years of each other, actually. When they were founded, the Northeast United States is where all the Orthodox were. And that's where all the vocations were being generated. And so, I think this is a significant thing that people need to hear, because there's a lot of layers and a lot of facets to this. But one thing I want to add about this is that for a man and his wife to go to seminary now, here in 2025, often means they're committing to move across the country, away from their families, away from their networks, away from the people who have helped them and supported them all these years, away from them. And then for the rest of their lives, very likely, they will just see them at holidays. And they'll be disconnected from all those networks. And it's, of course, a significant financial risk as well in many cases. So the recruitment is now happening. What's happening is that the most growing parts of the country are generating the vocations, and then the vocations, because the number of parishes, the density of parishes is still highest in the Northeast. That is still the case, right? There's the higher density of parishes up here. And I think not only is there are these financial issues and the big sort of hurdles that make it more difficult to come, but this is something that my wife has pointed out to me, which I think is really important, is that, and because she knows, she talks to a lot of clergy wives, there's a lot of stress that comes on marriages, on clergy marriages, because they're yanked away from their networks. They're yanked away from their friends and their family. And you might say, oh, well, it should be like the military. Everybody should just agree, we're going on an adventure, dear, and that's just the way that it is. Fine. Some people feel that way. That's what they want. That's what they want out of life, and it works just perfectly for them. But let's face it. Military divorce is a very high rate. That's happening at high rates. Clergy divorce happens at a ridiculously high rate. And a lot of that comes, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but a factor certainly is this geographic issue, right? So let's talk about seminary recruitment now that my little rant about geography is done. But I think this is huge, and I hope that there's some people listening that will think about this.
So let me give some numbers, if I could, real quick. I'm just the numbers guy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to do. I do want to talk a little bit, just to put a coda on what we were saying about current parish load. So there's, as of 2020, there were 2,014 Eastern Orthodox parishes in North America. That number has probably grown a little bit in the last 5 years, but also we all know parishes close. And so it's probably still a good number to work with. If we go with the conservative estimate that we have about 1.64 million Orthodox Christians in America right now, which seems right to me, that means we have currently about 814 people, so that's about 233 to 235 families per parish on average. Now, the ideal capacity, there's different ways of measuring this. You can just go and look at studies that have been done for how to measure, the ideal number of meaningful relationships you can have, the ideal number of families a pastor can effectively pastor, and so on. But it's probably around 100 families. Some people would even put the number lower than that, but let's just say 100 families. So that means that we're probably about 2.3 times over the ideal capacity if we wanted everyone to get the kind of, let's be honest, one of the things that drew me to the church and draws many men to the church is the strong tradition that we have of spiritual fatherhood. and that ability to have somebody who's in your life, who's hearing your confessions on a regular basis. Some of us, it's true, converts confess a lot more. Man, we just have most of us are carrying a lot of baggage. I don't know what to say. Some of us just need it, and
we got sins.
So most parishes are at about 2.3% of 2.3 times their theoretical capacity. So going back to those growth scenarios that I gave you guys earlier, if we had basically, let's say in the most conservative scenario, the one where we grow by 69% over the next 15 years. If we want to just maintain our current parish density, like priest to parishioner ratio, we need to be ordaining about 160 priests per year. That's the number as far as I can figure it out. So this includes 68 priests to replace attrition, priests for new parishes, and then also going back to that number of new parishes we need to be planning. That means that we really ideally, if we were trying to put all these guys through seminary, we would need to have about 639 men enrolled in seminary at any given time over the next 15 years to basically make sure that every 3 years you're getting that graduating class that's going to give you what you have. So we really need to increase our current replacement rate by about 138%. This is wow. I think, a conservative estimate. If you wanted to go to a healthy capacity, one priest to 100 families, the numbers are insane. We're talking about 1,800 seminarians enrolled at any given time over the next 15 years. We're talking about increasing our current replacement rate by 586%. So all that being said, I do want to also just look at real quick, because you were talking about locality, a little bit on population growth, population density. I have done a lot of work. And in fact, the work that we've been doing over the last few months, I think we're the only people who've done this for Orthodoxy, which is very careful studies about parish growth and tracking it in parallel with population growth and population density in various states. So if anybody out there, you're a chancellor of a diocese or you're a bishop of a diocese or something like that, and you want to know, hey, where should we be planting parishes but aren't? If you wanted to know that, for instance, please call Matthew Namee, and we would love to help you. This is, we're here to serve you. Okay, so parishes, so there's a couple of ways that we can kind of look at this. One would be to look at the parishes in the lower 48 founded in the last 20 years. And by the way, this graphic actually comes from an amazing interactive tool which I built, which Matthew and Father Andrew, you guys have seen it on the back end. It is quite slick, I think, if I do say so myself.
If you do say so
very
yourself.
good,
just a little bit. It's a really cool interactive tool. It's kind of like Google Maps, so you can zoom in on any area, and there's a slider and there's a window. You can change the time frame of the window, and it will show you all the parishes that have been founded in those areas, in that city, in that town, where they are, all those different things.
And so we will put this on the Orthodox Studies website soon. So
yeah, the interactive tool will be up for you guys to play around with for sure. Yeah. So there's so this graphic right here comes from that. This is just a still of the parishes founded in the lower 48. By the way, there's cool stuff happening in Alaska right now. Nobody's trying to shortchange Alaska. I just could not fit it in this particular image. But actually, Alaska is one of the areas that we're seeing very unexpected growth right now in terms of new parishes founded over the last 20 years. So anyway, this may be another conversation, but I love Alaska. And, for those of us in the OCA, Alaska is, as somebody put it to me once, is kind of the Holy Land. And so, anytime there's an opportunity to kind of shed light on the good work of the Alaskan Church, I'm always happy to do that. But in any case, so this is parishes founded in the lower 48 states in the last 20 years. And what you will notice is there are a couple of hot spots. Those are basically new parishes splitting off of existing parishes, like new missions that are still relatively located relatively closely, especially in the Washington, D.C. area, to well-established parishes, and obviously also kind of a similar thing happening in Phoenix. But most of these parishes, and when I say most of these parishes, 90% of them, 90.3%, are outside of that northeast corridor. They're outside of that, the traditional, you could say, the old guard states of Orthodoxy in America. And the majority of that 90% are located in what are commonly called the Sun Belt states. And the Sun Belt states, in this case, I will generously extend it all the way to Texas for purposes of what I'm talking about today. Although some people would say Sun Belt goes to doesn't go quite that far west. But you know what? It's October and it's 90 degrees outside. We're in the Sun Belt. So our biggest areas of growth, if we just look at the last 25 years, our biggest areas of growth are in those Sun Belt states. And basically that's also the part of the country that is growing the most. And so like the Sun Belt migration pattern is the most important migration pattern right now to understand in terms of American economics. And basically the growth of Orthodoxy in the Sun Belt states is tracking with that migration pattern. There are some states that are actually seem to be tracking way above it. For instance, Texas, go Texas. And there are other states that are a little more sluggish, like North Carolina, but are still kind of growing. The weakest areas of growth for us, by the way, again, if you want to know, if you're a bishop and you just want to know, like, where do we send the missionaries? Wouldn't that be great if we could get to the point where we're like, let's start sending missionaries and not just, react to what's happening. But in any case, they did do that in the old times, so I'm told. But
back in the day.
If you want to know where to send the missionaries, our weakest area of growth in the country right now is in the Mormon Belt states. This would be like Utah and Idaho. Which is interesting because there are some good things happening there, but they are not tracking with the population growth in those states. There's an inverse correlation, so strong Orthodox growth despite weak population growth in states like Alaska, Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, Pennsylvania, as we mentioned. And the Northeast, with the exception of Pennsylvania, is not experiencing, and a little bit in New York as well, is not experiencing a ton of Orthodox growth. But basically, the sluggishness in Orthodox growth is tracking along with the sluggish population growth in those states.
And so to be clear, we're talking about parish establishment. When we're talking about growth, we're not talking about converts at this point. We're talking about parishes being established in recent years. And there are, like, you'll hear amazing stories out of, say, Utah of converts, right? We aren't establishing parishes fast enough.
Right. Yeah, and so that's a really important point, Matthew, because one of the reasons that I am trying to measure, one of the reasons that we went about measuring growth in this way is because what we're looking for is like growth over time, like stable communities being founded, right? It's great that we have converts showing up. I'm more happy about that than anybody, but ultimately what we're going to do is form stable or well-formed Orthodox Christians who will then go out into all the world preaching the gospel, etc.
Yeah, because we're talking about, there's two sides, right? There's growth and then there's also capacity. And capacity is about ordaining clergy, building new parishes, and right now, as you said, there's a higher need for capacity in certain areas, and the capacity is not actually being expanded in those areas to the degree that it should be.
That's right. And again, if anybody ever wants this kind of analysis done for their diocese, for their metropolis, and so on, we have done that for some jurisdictions and dioceses. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, you contact Matthew Namee, and we're here to serve you. So all right. So the last thing that I want to show, and then I'll be quiet for a moment and let you guys talk, is the parish distribution. So looking at this next graphic here, this is the parishes in the United States in the lower 48 right now. But what we've done is actually done the math to calculate which of those parishes are more than a 500-mile drive from the nearest Orthodox seminary. And so so you'll see there's kind of a hole there in the Northeast, and that's because all the parishes in that hole are within 500 miles, which is still kind of a long drive, but they're within 500 miles of a seminary. And you'll notice, again, there are some huge concentrations that are outside of the proximity to the seminaries that are places where there's a lot of Orthodox parishes and where Orthodoxy is actually growing in a rapid way. So again, when you're thinking about somebody uprooting their life and so on, that's something to kind of consider. So we have a lot more that we could talk about in terms of tools, but I'll pass it over to you, Father Andrew, now to address kind of the next part of this report.
Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, another thing we should probably add to that question of capacity is where are the seminaries? I mean, this gets talked about all the time, right? The seminaries in the Northeast, and yet there's no seminary. I mean, the three big seminaries are all in the Eastern time zone. Now, it should be pointed out on the other side of this that if you look at where the American population is generally, we should point out that almost 50% of Americans live in the Eastern time zone, right? It is just a little, I think it's like 46, 47% of Americans live in the Eastern time zone, right? So it's not that it's ridiculous that those seminaries are there, even now with the current situation of Orthodoxy America. It's not ridiculous, right? And then another, a significant, chunk, whatever, or maybe I'm misremembering. Yeah, about 2/3, 3/4 of the U.S. lives in either Eastern or Central time zone,
and a lot of that is basically New York, Georgia, Florida.
Yeah, exactly. The what they call the Boz, particularly the Boswash Metroplex, everywhere from Boston to Washington D.C. basically is this huge population density. Massive. I mean, I-95, the most traveled road in the world, right? So it's not crazy. So I remember, there was discussion for a while about moving St. Vladimir's Seminary. And I don't know that it was ever officially announced anywhere, but everyone knew that they were talking about moving it to your town, Deacon Seraphim, to Dallas, right? Everybody knew they were talking about going to Texas.
It was until they found out I was here.
Yeah, and they're like, wait, nope, can't do that.
Not that guy.
But that doesn't seem like it's a thing now. So what's that possibility? Like, should we really be pushing to try to move the seminaries? Is moving the right way to address this question of expanding our clergy capacity? How can we get more people with a Master of Divinity? Which actually raises the question.
Yeah.
Should we be requiring a Master of Divinity degree to be ordained?
This is big and a lot to unpack here.
Yes.
So first of all, just on the question of, St. Vlad's a few years ago, it was sort of an open secret. I think it might have even been announced that they were going to move to Dallas-Fort Worth, and then it kind of was taken off the table. The idea of building a kind of custom-built Orthodox seminary mega campus is not a very viable one, to say the least. Higher ed in general is dying in America, and it's the kind of higher ed that matches our seminaries. Smaller colleges, heterodox seminaries, places that don't have gigantic endowment funds. Those are the higher ed institutions that are collapsing. Harvard will always be there. Stanford will always be there. But, these smaller institutions, and our seminaries are going to, no matter how big they were to get, they're going to be smaller institutions, right? We're not having tens of thousands of students or big endowments. So, this is the kind of higher ed that's failing. We also have the data that 60% of college-age Americans do not go to college. And the majority of those who do go to college are women. So this means that something like 2/3 of American men won't get a college degree. And that number is trending worse if you're interested in higher ed.
If that is a requirement for going to seminary to get an MDiv, that means that 2/3 of Orthodox men, that are part of the convert surge that we've just been discussing, won't be eligible just right out of the gate.
Right, more and more. And it doesn't mean, it used to be that going to college meant you were an educated, intelligent person. To a large extent, and if you were wanted to be an educated, intelligent person, you were sort of inclined to go to college. That can no longer be taken for granted. I mean, information is obviously available widely. You don't need to go to college. You can sign up for the great courses or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can take college level courses, from Orthodox Studies Institute, from Symbolic World. I mean, and get a significant education on a particular subject for $150, a couple $100, or,
right.
There's all kinds of online education now where you don't necessarily come out with a degree at the other end, but you come out with some understanding, and it's a very similar, although not the same, but a similar experience to, sitting in a classroom.
And people are just making the economic decision to pursue trades that don't require going into a bunch of college debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we see this decline happening. We see this shift. And it's no surprise. I mean, these seminaries, the heterodox seminaries, are closing all over the country. You can Google like seminary campus for sale. You can go get real cheap seminary campuses if you want another campus, right? They're like, $3, $4, $5 million, right? Go buy yourself a campus. They're gorgeous. But that's not really where the big bet is, because the whole system is kind of failing. The system that we ended up. And we can talk about this in a little bit if you want, the kind of how we got here into the current system that we have. But that system from the 20th century is failing. And it's not failing for Orthodoxy. It's just failing in general for America.
Yes. I just want to insert, by the way, since you said that, I think it's really important to note that a lot of the trends that we've been talking about regarding the Orthodox are not unique to us. Now, some are, and we've noted them, but a lot of them are not. There are other churches in America that are seeing this big influx of people, and a lot of the same kinds of demographic trends are affecting other kinds of churches in the United States. So I think that's an important thing to consider as we look at the trends that we're experiencing and try to analyze how to address them, is realize, okay, a lot of this is because it's something that's generally happening in society, and the collapse of higher education is definitely one of those things. Definitely.
So just if you want to think status quoist for a second, right, and minor tweaks and these kinds of things in a productive way, in a way that would be potentially valuable and helpful, I think thinking in terms of non-residential satellites of existing institutions is one potentially viable part of the solution. This is not the whole solution, but it is one potential piece to the solution of this problem of capacity. Essentially, it's recruitment and capacity. Recruitment, it's really hard to get people to move to these places in the Northeast where we have seminaries for a bunch of reasons. Yep. And capacity is, even if you could get them to move there, you can't fit them all. The ones that we need, if we need to be increasing our seminary or our priest output by 5 to 10 times annually, 5 to 10x, right? They couldn't handle a doubling.
Yeah,
at the current institutions.
We don't have the classrooms. We don't have the faculty. We don't have the residences. We don't have it. Even if they were completely all packed,
right,
that would not be enough.
So one piece, let me just say it, one piece is this idea of maybe, non-residential satellite kind of a thing. That could be one part of the solution. Not the whole thing, but one part.
What about online education? I mean, ever since the pandemic hit, it's rocketed massively. There's this incredible number of opportunities. Now, we already mentioned a couple of these kinds of things. I mean, should be doing like an MDiv program through the internet. Is that the solution? I mean, with maybe some in-person component. I mean, these things do exist already on some level.
The internet, we were just saying the internet is a useful goal if you just want to be educated. You want to learn facts. If you want to teach someone church history, you can teach someone church history through the internet. But this kind of starts to get into a deeper issue, which what is our goal here? What are we trying to create? What are we trying to produce? If we're trying to produce great priests, right? Men who are pious shepherds, and they have a deep knowledge of the Orthodox faith, and they're spiritually mature, all of these things. This is what we want, and we need lots of them. The question is an MDiv, a 3-year MDiv accredited by the Association of Theological Schools, is that the best way to produce great parish priests? That's the question. And we actually have some data on this.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, like, all three of us are historians in one way or another. And this is actually the main thing that I think we all have in common in terms of our own education, intellectual outlook, is that we're all historians. And we know from church history that going to seminary, residential seminary, 3 years, and getting a master's degree is not actually the norm for most of Orthodox history. Heck, it's not even the norm for just American Christianity in general, except for just the last maybe 50, 60 years. Like most clergy in the U.S. of whatever stripe had bachelor's degrees at best. Master's degrees, I think, when does that become prevalent? Is maybe the 50s or 60s?
60s and 70s.
60s or 70s. It's not even that old. It's only a little bit older than I am.
It's Gen X, man. It's a Gen Xer.
Oh, man. So it's an interesting question we could dive into this. Why do we feel that we need to do that? It's funny. I mean, I've seen you talk about this on Twitter, and I've seen some responses. People say, well, we can't lower our standards.
And I just want to be really clear.
What does that mean?
Nobody on this live stream is in favor of lower standards. I don't think anybody wants that. If we're going to have an extra 1.88 million Orthodox Christians in the next 15 years, I want those people to not be crazy. I want them to be well formed.
Let me be clear, and then I want Deacon Seraphim to give us some data on this. In my opinion, our standards are far too low, and we need to dramatically increase our standards while dramatically increasing our output. Okay, we have to do both. We can't pick between quality and quantity. We have to increase quality and increase quantity.
I think when you raise your standards in the right way, what you get is more people hearing the call and answering the challenge. And I think that's part of what's going on in terms of people coming into the Orthodox Church. Is like, wow, this is the highest possible standard for being a Christian. It is. I will say that I'm an Orthodox Christian. I absolutely believe that. Like, I want to join. Not everybody joins for the same reason, but there's a lot. They're like, this is the challenge that I need. This is the whole enchilada. I want it all with the side of the sour cream and the guac and the nachos, everything. And sorry to wax Tex-Mex there for you.
Yeah, I'm suddenly really triggered and hungry. Yeah.
But I think if you make the priesthood, if you raise the standards of the priesthood in the right way, that actually you will have more men answering the call. That's what I think.
Right. So let's do the data. Go back to be the boring data guy for a second here. So we have a study, and it's an anonymous study of seminarians. A lot of them pulled on a lot of different categories of ministry. And so I have a fun little chart here. The way to read this chart, if you're not used to looking at such things, is if you see that diagonal line that goes from the bottom left to the top right, anything above that line is something that we're doing well in our MDiv programs, according to people who have graduated from them. And anything below that line is something we're not doing well. So along the top, you've got importance, let's say, from left to right, you've got importance to ministry. That is, these different areas of their ministry, how important are they in their pastoral work? And then from bottom to top, you've got preparedness. In other words, how well did my MDiv prepare me in this aspect of my ministry? Right? So anything that's top right would be, it's very important and I was prepared well. And anything that's bottom left would be not important at all and I wasn't prepared well, and so on. So you've got 4 quadrants here. So with that diagonal line running through the graph here, anything above that diagonal line is something, and I have the topics here kind of sorted to general categories, but anything above that diagonal line is something that we're doing and teaching well, which is some liturgics, some biblical studies, and theology. Anything below that diagonal line is something that a pastor, somebody's been a pastor, either as a new pastor or maybe somebody's been a pastor a long time, has said, they did not really tell me this is going to happen in seminary, or they did not prepare me well in seminary. Yeah. And if we dig down into some of those gaps include things like parish administration, rated very high in importance, but very, very low in terms of how well seminary prepares you for parish administration. This includes things like parish leadership, financial management, fundraising, organizational skills. You could totally argue, by the way, that it's not supposed to actually be the job of the priest to do those things. I'm one of the people who would probably say, why should you wait tables when you've got the service of the Lord to perform? What if there was an order of people in the church whose job was to wait tables? Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like, any priest you talk to at some point in his life, probably multiple times a day, says, they didn't teach me that in seminary.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Yeah,
it's so cliched.
By the way, one of the areas that's rated the worst is personal life and health. Things like work-life balance, family relationships. How do I take care of my wife and my children and also be a priest? My physical health. How do I manage my time well? Those are things priests would like to know and do not feel, that they have been equipped with those things during their MDiv. Youth ministry, preaching and teaching also have huge gaps. I know there are some programs addressing the preaching thing right now, which I'm very happy about. And I know some of the people involved in those things. And just generally speaking, parish ministry is one of the areas that has kind of the worst gap between how important it is and then how well it was covered. If we look at, and I will just also say, we have a survey coming out soon that we're doing in partnership with OYM, Orthodox Youth Ministries, and it's a huge clergy survey across jurisdictions, asking lots and lots of different questions. But one of those questions that we asked was, what are your biggest pastoral needs? Like, what are the things that you as a pastor are the most worried about right now? 28% of them said, like, this is the highest category, technology, social media, pornography. That these things are cited as being the most smartphone, social media addiction, one of the most dangerous trends among the parishioners. Porn is very frequently mentioned as a pastoral struggle. There are concerns also, obviously, about exposure to harmful Orthodox content online. So we're talking radical, fringe, fundamentalist, liberal, etc. Just, the stuff out there on the fringe that you can find online. And lots of other things that are mentioned. Secularism, among families, like, families prioritizing sports games over showing up to Divine Liturgy with their kids on a Sunday. Mental health, anxiety, depression, isolation among both parishioners and clergy. Sexuality, gender, culture pressures related to those things, the need for family piety. By the way, this is something that if you want to get out ahead, I'll just speak to all the parents out there, all the lay people out there. If you want to get ahead of that 15 years from now situation, it's going to start in your family prayer corner. It's absolutely vital. If you're watching this, it's not, oh, no, why haven't the bishops, blah, blah, blah. No, it starts with you. You raise those kids. You raise those sons who are going to want to be priests. You raise those sons and daughters who are going to be good parish council members, who are going to be raising funds, who are going to be working and tithing and raising their own kids and so on. Like that, it absolutely has to start there. So, okay. Anyway, that's my little rant. I'll kick it back over.
Oh, man. Okay, so. I mean, the takeaways from this are, we don't have enough capacity in our seminaries. We're putting up a bunch of obstacles in front of men that could be good priests. And frankly, the clergy themselves are saying that seminary did not adequately prepare them for their actual day-to-day experience of being parish clergy. So are there some other models that we could talk about? Like, do other countries where Orthodoxy is present, do they require like an MDiv or something similar for a man to be a priest? Like, what else is going on elsewhere? Is this the only model?
Definitely not. So there are places, let's say, take Russia and Romania, two of the biggest Orthodox countries as an example. In those places, you do have to go to seminary to be a priest, although seminary is not grad school in those places. And I think one of the things that we have to, we've talked about geography. I don't think anybody realizes how big the United States is. It's so big.
It's huge.
I mean,
I think about this every day.
Yeah.
The United States, the lower 48 are 50% larger than the Roman Empire. Okay.
Yeah, I think about the Roman Empire every day, but it's like, it's this one. It's our Roman Empire. Like I constantly, that was the crazy thing about going to Europe and realizing you could just cross a country in like 3 hours on a train.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Romania is smaller than Michigan, right? Greece is smaller. Greece is smaller than Louisiana. Lebanon and Syria combined can fit inside of Nebraska. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we're talking tiny, tiny, tiny geography compared to the United States.
And I mean, and that makes a big difference in terms of how you think about distribution of clergy, where are clergy from, where are they educated, you know. You don't have to, let's say you're from northern Lebanon and then they send you to serve in Beirut. You literally are a day trip, less than a day trip from your family.
But they won't, because that's outside your archdiocese, right?
That's right.
Right? You're not going to get transferred out of your archdiocese. The archdioceses are tiny, right? So in Romania or in Russia, you have to go, you want to be a priest, you're going to have to go to seminary. But first of all, it's not grad school. And secondly, it is going to be local. You're going to the nearest metropolitan area, right? Where you still have family, you still have your networks. We're not talking about uprooting yourself and moving across the entire country. We're not saying if you live in, one part of Russia, you're going to have to move to Siberia, which is kind of what we do here, right? It's kind of what we do here.
Yeah.
I mean, where you say to some guy in California or Texas, you've got to move to New York. Like, come on, what the heck?
I want to say something radical. I'm not a bishop, so it doesn't matter that I say this, but I'm just throwing this out as an opinion. I'm throwing this out as an opinion because, thanks be to God, we have a bunch of people listening to us right now. But as we are continuing to be in a clergy shortage, shouldn't we be favoring the parishes that are producing the clergy when we decide where we're going to assign them? Shouldn't we be strengthening our strongest places rather than, frankly, rather than always throwing a crutch out to parishes that are not producing clergy? I mean, there's a lot of reasons, of course, they might not be producing clergy, but spiritual health is number one. Spiritual health is number one. Shouldn't we be putting our new clergy in the places that their ministry is going to be received the best? Now, that doesn't mean you should just ignore everybody else, but I'm just throwing that out there. Like,
are you saying to the one who has, more will be given? Is that what you're saying? That's Russia, Romania. What's one example. Another way to look, though, is that's not the only way. So Greece, Cyprus, Antioch. Okay, let's take those examples. Very traditional Orthodox places. It is not a requirement that every priest attend. So, like Antioch, we have the Balamon. A lot of people are Antiochian will know the Balamon School of Theology, right? Is very fairly well known. Not every Antiochian priest in Lebanon and Syria goes to the Balamon. Most of them don't. The vast majority don't.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. They think that's the Antiochian seminary, and so they all go to seminary. Actually, most of them don't. It's a minority that go to the Balamont.
So there are non-residential programs in the archdioceses where you can be trained to be a priest. Now, if you are a local guy and you go through a non-residential program, you're not going to go on to become the dean of a major cathedral. You're not going to go on to be teaching somewhere, or if you're celibate, going on to be a bishop. Like, no, you need to go and get the kind of higher level of training. But those are the exceptions. The ordinary sort of small town priest doesn't, in these places, have to go to kind of the institution of higher education to be trained to be a pastor. So, and when we get into kind of history, so that's like the current situation. And then when we get into history, most Orthodox priests were not formally educated in an academic institution. This is just, they were trained locally by the bishop, by experienced clergy. They're ordained for a specific altar, and you don't typically, historically, move people around, right? You weren't moving a priest around. He got ordained for that altar. He's probably going to die as the priest of that altar.
I mean, the canons presume that the altar that you're ordained at is the altar you're going to serve at for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, I want to say, and we can talk a little history as well, but just about the geography piece again, right? Because I keep coming back to this, but it's like you think you understand, you don't understand how big of a deal this is. Outside of America, American Orthodoxy, maybe Canada. I don't know much about the Canadian situation, to be honest with you. Forgive me, Canadians. I
talk about a large country.
There's actually some really interesting data in the Canada side of things. Orthodoxy is also growing in Canada, but anyway, different
It's growing, but I don't want to go on a Canadian rabbit trail. No offense, Canadians. You know, maybe we could do one of these for Canada someday. Never before in the history of the church, and nowhere else today, is a man required to travel hundreds or thousands of miles to learn how to become a priest. We are the only ones doing that here in North America. So that's important to understand. We're asking of these men something that nobody else asks. No other bishop in the world is asking his prospective priests to travel 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles to learn how to be a priest. But we do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So real quick, since we've mentioned this several times, I think it's just useful to know, and I know, Matthew, you've done a lot of work on this. How do we get to the point where seminary is what we expect and which everybody considers to be sort of the norm now? How did that happen?
Yes. So let's start with pre-revolutionary Russia. Pre-revolutionary Russia, in the centuries before the revolution, starts bringing over, kind of copying Western Christian models of both kind of church structure and governance and also education. So I wrote an article where that gets into some of this stuff called The Unholy Side of Holy Russia. I wrote that at orthodoxhistory.org, so you can find that. In Russian seminaries, Russian kind of priest training in the pre-revolutionary period, you had seminaries, which were high schools. They were high school programs. And you almost had like a priestly caste, right? So, if your dad was a priest, you were probably going to go to the seminary.
Well, I mean, in one point in pre-revolutionary Russia, there were certain families that legally were priestly families. And those are the ones from which, like, there's a book about this called The Russian Levites by Gregory Fries. I mean, the priesthood is full of guys who were basically forced into it.
Yes. Yeah. And the situation was, so you went to seminary, instruction was done in Latin, which nobody knew. And there's this great episode in the 19th century where, St. Philaret of Moscow was a big advocate of the use of the vernacular. He was like a leader in translating the Bible into modern Russian. He insisted we need to be educating our seminarians in Russian. They don't understand Latin. Why are we using Latin in the classrooms? And his rival was also named Philaret. It was Philaret of Kiev. And so Philaret of Kiev retorted back, well, if we don't teach them in Latin, how can they read the Fathers?
Wow.
So that was how they did it, right? It was real bad. Seminaries were hotbeds of revolutionary activity. The most famous product of a pre-revolutionary Russian Orthodox seminary, by far, was a man named Joseph Stalin. Seminaries during the 1905 revolution, there's like all this kind of, there's these eruptions of violence and disorder. If you made it through seminary and you were kind of a top student, top tier, you would get picked to go to theological academy, which was basically grad school. And the academies were also hotbeds of revolutionary activity. So there's an episode from St. Tikhon's life. St. Tikhon, kind of in the late 19th century, is when he was going through all this. And he was at St. Petersburg Theological Academy, and the other students, the Metropolitan of St. Petersburg was coming to visit for some big event. And so all the students said, we're going to stage a big walkout so that he has no one to speak to in the auditorium, right? It's going to be this big protest. And the only guy who didn't engage in the walkout was St. Tikhon. And he was lambasted by his fellow students for this, his fellow sort of theological academy students, for having been like this sellout, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the environment. So I would say, I would not idealize the educational system of pre-revolutionary Russia. it had a lot of problems, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so that's
I think also one thing that people will say about, when talking about historical training of clergy is a lot of people have this idea that, they used to be, they were all just sent to monasteries. Is that actually true? That clergy were just sent to monasteries and they were taught how to be parish priests there? Is that true?
No, I mean, no, it's not. And I think there's a certain idealization of the way monasticism actually worked in practice. Like, I mean, this is a whole other rabbit trail I don't want to go down.
Yeah.
But, monasteries were not like centers of piety necessarily in, like, let's say the 18th century, right? Like, yes, there were holy places. Like, eventually you get Optina and you get Sarov and places like that in Russia and then other places. But I mean, monasticism itself was in pretty bad shape. Like in Lebanon, they had to revive the Balamon monastery in the 19th century. Yeah. It was completely dead. Monasticism was kind of seen as kind of grifty in a lot of places like Greece. In the 18th, 19th century.
I remember I read there's a great book by Graham Speake about the history of Mount Athos, which actually talks about the state of Mount Athos in the 19th century and how degraded it frankly was. But I mean, even setting that stuff aside, right? Like, let's say, okay, let's just send all of our seminarians to the monasteries to teach them how to be parish priests. Number one, we don't have the monasteries don't have that capacity. They don't have the capacity. That's just not even a possibility. But also, frankly, being a monastic priest is not the same thing as being a parish priest. It's not. Monasteries' problems, they have their own set of problems that they are good at dealing with. And it is not the same set of problems that is at parishes. There's overlap for sure. There's some liturgical overlap, although not 100%. But there's a lot of other things that monastics just aren't dealing with. And just because someone is holy doesn't mean that they're omni-qualified. I think people have this idea sometimes that holiness makes you qualified to do everything it's just not even true. It's just not true.
Well, and the reality
historically
is,
we know that this is not actually the case. It is not actually.
What's the biggest monasteries in America? If you had a monastery of 50 monks in America is a
that'd be huge
monastery
for
right?
America.
I mean, we need to be producing hundreds and hundreds of priests every year. Okay?
It would overwhelm the monasteries.
We wouldn't have monasteries anymore.
It would destroy their life.
It's not an option. So how do we get into like this situation in America, right? So I talked a little bit about pre-revolutionary Russia. The system we have today, you said it earlier, it began in the late 1930s when the three main American Orthodox seminaries were all founded within about a year or so of each other. Yeah, and originally they offered bachelor's degrees, and the young men going there were college age. So kind of like in Romania today, right? You go to seminary when you're in college age, right? It's a bachelor's program. It was very common for these guys to graduate at about 22 or so years old, right? When you're about college age graduation, they'd immediately get married because that was what you did back then. And then they would get ordained right away. So you had tons of these super young guys that were ordained priests in the 1940s, let's say. In the 50s and 60s, St. Vladimir's and Holy Cross in particular become intellectual hubs. And this is thanks to people like Father George Florovsky, Father Alexander Schmemann. I mean, this is kind of the heyday of all these kind of European Orthodox academics coming over to the United States and sort of raising the bar academically at these seminaries. And in the late 60s, is when they start awarding. Originally, they were awarding what was called a So they were originally doing a bachelor's of theology, and then they introduced the bachelor's of divinity, which is actually like a grad degree, basically. And so very quickly that becomes inflated up to the master's of divinity. And then in the 70s, they were St. Vladimir's and Holy Cross are accredited by the Association of Theological Schools, ATS. So ATS is a Protestant seminary association that was accrediting these, that does still to this day accredits these Orthodox seminaries. This is really the beginning of modern American Orthodox seminary education is in the 70s when you have ATS accreditation and the MDiv. That's when the modern era begins. And St. Vladimir's Holy Cross added other degree programs that were more academic. They were sort of academic focused, not focused on priestly formation, as so MAs, THMs, these kinds of things.
Yep.
D-Min has become a kind of, which is a weird thing because it sounds like you're saying
that's the degree that all the gods of the Gentiles get. They're all D-Mins. Sorry.
Yes.
Had to make that standard joke.
And so, you know, why the MDiv? I mean, it's essentially the clergy equivalent of a law degree. You know, because in those days, clergy were seen as they're the three great professions. You know, the lawyers, doctors, and clergy. Those were the three great professions. And so we wanted to have our clergy as educated as an Episcopalian priest. That was kind of the gold standard. And so we were basically copying Episcopalian models. That's kind of how the system we have developed. St. Tikhon's was always a little different. It was more sort of it was a pastoral school. It wasn't really as academically focused. And it added the MDiv later. It got accredited later than the others, and to this day, St. Tikhon still only offers the MDiv. So they haven't had the proliferation of these other degree programs. St. Tikhon's focus is entirely to this day, training priests.
They did for a little while. There was a bachelor's program for a little while. Actually, while I was in seminary, there were some people who, and it was in a cooperation with nearby Marywood University there in Nipa. But yeah, it's pretty much just priestly training. MDivs.
You didn't have the MAs and the THMs and all of those.
No, that's never been a thing at St. Tikhon's. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what we have is like the status quo gold standard being the ATS accredited MDiv. This is a kind of Cold War era. You know, it's a Gen Xer. That's how we got what we got. And you know, the truth of it is that the MDiv, it's not strictly speaking an academic degree. You can't take an MDiv and go straight into a PhD program.
Yeah,
right?
it's a professional degree. And I think, honestly, one of the difficulties is that a lot of people who get an MDiv think they have an academic degree. And often they think of themselves as being an expert in what was basically their favorite class in seminary. But it's not. That is not what that degree is. It's not. It's a professional
I would argue
degree.
that a 3-year MDiv is not nearly long enough amount of time to either form a man as an effective pastor or turn him into an elite intellectual.
That's right.
You can't do either of those things in a 3-year MDiv program.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, okay. If it's not working or not working enough or whatever, what should we be doing? Like, what are some ideas to throw out there for people? You know, God willing, maybe there's a bishop that's going to listen to this conversation, or a chancellor, or someone in charge of clergy formation, or just, you know, putting these ideas out there so they can be discussed, and maybe we'll get to where they need to go. So, what are some possible solutions? Like, I think we should begin with the question of, what is our goal? It's not just like make more clergy, because we could just line up a bunch of guys and ordain them. That would be a bad idea. You know, what's the goal? Like, what is the thing, the ideal that we're actually kind of moving towards, you know?
Right. So we need a lot of men, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds per year, who are pious, mature, empathetic, wise, administratively competent, right? We need them to all be effective leaders, which means that they have to be good at delegating authority. They have to be good at rallying the community. They have to be excellent communicators, able to teach orthodoxy to all different kinds of people. That's what we're trying to produce, because we need that so that we can have great parish communities. And we need great parish communities because we want to all become saints. Like, we want to produce holy people. So to produce the holy people, we need the strong communities. To have strong communities, you need priests with these characteristics.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're trying to produce.
Yeah.
So we need a system that's built to produce that.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's a bunch of that
and
that I
3
think
years, 3 years is not long enough to produce that, for one thing.
No. I mean, I believe firmly. I mean, there's a reason for, and the clue for this is in the canons themselves. right? So for instance, you have to be at least 25 years old to be a deacon. That's what the canons say. You have to be at least 30 years old to be a presbyter or a priest. You have to be 33 to be a bishop. Why? Why are those ages there? I think that those are there because it's about maturity. It's about maturity. And so it's not about necessarily the age in and of itself. And it's actually interesting. The canon that says that presbyters have to be at least 30 says that you have to follow that even if he be otherwise worthy. It actually explicitly says, like, don't make an exception, although still it happens, And I know sometimes it turned out okay. But it's about maturity. And so, I think that the place to begin is with men who are mature, with men who are stable, with men who have a proven track record of being serious about being in the church, about doing the program of being an Orthodox Christian, who have, if they're married, that they have stable marriages, if they have kids, that they have. This is what it says in the Bible, by the way. If they're children, this is what it says in the Bible. Funny how that works. We actually have it laid out for us by St. Paul. That their children are being taken care of appropriately, and yeah, it might be that a priest doesn't have an encyclopedic brain frankly, like the two of you, and like I try to have myself, but that's okay. Like, you don't need to have an encyclopedic brain to be a good parish priest. Some of the things that are the most important for being a good parish priest are stuff that I struggle with. Like, I'm not really the kindest person in the world sometimes, but that's what you want is you want someone who loves people. And, I think that our parishes are actually full of men who have everything I just said, who have everything that I just said. So how do we get those guys? What do we do to get them and put them in the priesthood?
See, yeah, in a way, it's not so much, it's a self-imposed priest shortage. Because it's a shortage that's created by barriers to entry that we've constructed that don't necessarily correlate to the outcomes we want, right? And so, looked at another way, we have a massive market inefficiency, and if we can see that, we can leverage that into almost instantaneous solution to the problem, potentially, but we have to be willing to actually make adjustments.
Yeah. So what? What kind of adjustments? How do we So how do we stop shooting ourselves in the feet?
At the risk of getting too far out ahead of my skis, I think that the first thing we have to sort of consider, because it's already happening, because this is already going on quietly, is we need to talk about deacons. Right? So one of the big, I'll say this as a guy who does American Orthodox history. I think the most underrated story in American Orthodox history in the last, let's say, half century has been the rise of the diaconate.
Yeah. So what are we looking at? I remember hearing a story from the 1970s in the Antiochian Archdiocese. That's the archdiocese I serve in, and that you grew up in, Matthew. That I can't remember which deacon it was, but when he was ordained to the diaconate, he was on that day the second most senior deacon in the archdiocese, because he was literally the second deacon in the whole archdiocese.
That's right. It used to be the only deacon you had was the metropolitan's deacon.
That's right. And no one else had a deacon. And now, I think, at least in the Antiochian Archdiocese, I think that we have something like, is it 0.8 deacons per parish? Maybe it's more than that. It was, and it's gone up.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty close to having as many deacons now in the Antiochian Archdiocese as we do parishes in the Antiochian Archdiocese.
So almost every parish has at least one deacon. Almost every parish.
Some parishes have 0, some parishes have 2 or 3, right? But yes, it balances out to being about 1 to 1.
That's huge. That's huge. Sorry, I have to keep playing this card, but just in my lifetime.
Yes. And that is a huge credit to Metropolitan Philip. Who and frankly, I think Father Joseph Allen for having the vision and the kind of the willingness to think outside the box, to be able to do this, right? This was not a fluke thing that happened. This was something that was done by design, and it was pretty brilliant. And so there's that. Okay, so we had this rise of the diaconate in the Antiochian Archdiocese. We have in ROCOR, there are, especially in the Eastern American diocese and the Chicago diocese, and to a slightly lesser degree in the Western American diocese, similar numbers to what I just said about the Antiochians. So almost kind of one deacon per parish kind of a situation.
And what is it, Deacon Seraphim? Do you know what it is in the OCA? Like, what's the ratio in the OCA?
I think that the last number that we have is about like 0.5 deacons per parish, though I wouldn't be surprised if that number is low.
Yeah, we have, some of the diacons. So in the OCA, the deacons are trained at the diocesan level. They have diocesan.
And it's probably worth noting.
By the way, I do have plans to kind of figure that out. I mean, there are ways to get that number that I'm currently working on. So we'll probably have a more kind of detailed study about this coming out.
I was gonna say it's worth noting that even though the OCA is like right now, the GOA is bigger than the OCA in terms of number of people. The OCA actually has the most number of parishes of any jurisdiction. So as a result, OCA parishes are on average smaller, but there's more of them. There's more of them, and so it's less. So it's not that's not a deacon per capita number.
Right, that's right.
It's deacons per parish. Yeah.
And to round it out, the GOA is something like 0.2 deacons per parish, so they've lagged behind. Although that number is way higher than it was 25 years ago.
Oh yes, I'm meeting more and more GOA deacons.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that again. It's my own order, so I have to talk about it a little bit. But because A, it is the most fun job, but B, I mean, this is what the apostles instituted it for. Is actually stepping into some of these roles and meeting some of these needs. There are things, teaching catechumens, helping with parish administration, organizing people to just keep the temple cleaned and looking beautiful, organizing the altar server so that the service that is done for God every Sunday and every feast day is pleasing and glorious. Like there are tons of things that you can do as a deacon that are not overstepping the boundaries of what it means to be a deacon, so that the priest can actually be a better priest. Yeah,
exactly.
And the deacons are being produced out of the parishes. So how are we getting these deacons? It's not like the archdiocese or the diocese or whatever is ordaining a deacon and then sending him to a parish. I saw a comment from a priest in the chat, they need to send some deacons up here. We need a deacon. And it's like, well, the thing is, your parish has to produce the deacon.
That's right.
That's how this works.
So that's interesting. If you want a deacon, you have to make one, right? Why? It's funny. I saw someone else in the chat basically say the idea that a priest serving in his own community that he's from or whatever is an inherently bad thing, that it's dangerous or whatever, right? But here's the truth. I know that we think that, like it's a bad idea, but I know of multiple priests actually who serve in the parish that they became Orthodox in. And I'm sure there's moments where it's problematic. But the truth is number one, a parish changes over the years. And if a priest is in a parish 20 years, he's going to have kind of 3 different congregations probably along the way, effectively. But also, let's face it, again, play the history card. This is the historical norm.
This is how
that a man from within the community becomes the presbyter of that community. From within the community, that's known by them, and he knows them in a way that you can't know them if you're a transplant.
And, Father Nicola Yenny, talk about Saint Raphael. Remember Father Nicola, right?
Yeah.
So Father Nicola Yenny, early 20th century priest, probably should be canonized. He was in Kearney, Nebraska. The Antiochians in Kearney, Nebraska really wanted to have a parish, to have a priest. And St. Raphael said, find a worthy man from among you and send him to me and I'll make him a priest. Right. And that was that was the playbook. He wasn't just making that up. He was taking that from the old country.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we need to set aside this idea that the expert stranger who comes to town is the ideal parish priest. I just don't think that that's true. The question is,
and if we're doing more in the way of
I was gonna say, if there's close family members in the parish that maybe like, oh, I remember when Timmy was just a kid or whatever, fine. Maybe have a visiting confessor that deals with them. Whatever you need to do, it's okay. Like, it's okay, you know. But again, the historical norm is that it's a man from within the community who is the presbyter of that community.
And really if we're going to have more priests overall, raising up a priest from within the community and having him as an assistant for a sort of being apprenticed essentially to the senior priest for a lengthy period of time, and then eventually taking on the mantle, is you can ease your way into that.
That's right. That's right. I think apprenticeship, mentorship, which is, I mean, it's happening now in many cases, but it does not tend to be institutionalized as the norm. And if we're going to have a lot more clergy, then we're going to need to teach them by putting them under clergy who know what they're doing. Not every priest should be a mentor, you know, but there are some that are solid and great, and you want them to reproduce themselves. I think that's the way to go. I mean, Father Tom Soroka actually said that in the chat earlier, and I super 100% agree, Father Tom. There should be a lot of mentorship going on, a lot of apprenticeship going on, because they didn't teach me that in seminary. The guy who's in the trenches, he is going to teach you that. Like, I learned how to be a parish priest, not from seminary, largely speaking. I'm not saying it didn't teach me anything. It absolutely taught me. I went to St. Tikhon's. It was very good. But it was Father Olaf Scott, God bless him, who I served 2 years under in Charleston, West Virginia. And he taught me how to actually serve day to day. Not just the church services, although I was prepared for that pretty well by seminary training and archdiocese training, but actually how to deal with people, how to run the place, all that kind of stuff. I think that should be where we focus our attention when it comes to training clergy.
So Metropolitan Saba has, in the Antiochian Archdiocese, has already identified deacons as being the key to solving the clergy shortage. So what he has put forward is we're going to raise up an army of deacons, and these deacons are going to help the priest, just like Deacon Seraphim is doing in his OCA parish, right? You become the right hand, really, of the priest, and you're doing a lot of the work that the priest would otherwise have to do. And you have an army of these guys who can kind of carry the load together. That is going to alleviate the burden on the priest. Over time, there is going to be a kind of the cream of the deacons. Not all of them, maybe not most of them, but long-term experienced deacons who have shown that they have the skills to be a good priest. Those guys, I mean, Metropolitan Saba it has done this. I've seen it happen already, where those guys, and even before him, Metropolitan Philip was even doing this, where you take one of those long-term deacons and, yeah, we can make the exception to the seminary thing and make that man a priest. That's happening with more and more frequency in certain jurisdictions. Not everywhere.
It's going to have to.
Now, it's very ad hoc at this point. It is not, there's not a system here. We're not talking about like a systematized program. We're talking about something that's pretty ad hoc. But with deacons, you do have the benefit of men who are ostensibly, they're canonically eligible, right? I mean, you're a deacon. You have to be canonically eligible to be a priest if you're canonically eligible to be a deacon. Probably. You obviously are serving the church. You have a lot of training and experience already, right? And after serving for a long time as a deacon, we get a pretty good feel for what kind of a pastor you're going to be. Some deacons are just going to be Sunday deacons, and that's fine. We need them.
So Deacon Seraphim, I saw you begin a sentence like 2 or 3 times.
Sorry.
Let's hear that sentence.
I was just going to say, and this would probably kind of be my closing remark, I think, on the tail of what Matthew was just saying, is that something that my spiritual father mentioned once, just in a homily, just in passing or something, that really kind of stuck with me. Of course, and I was a pastor in a Protestant church for about 10 years before I became Orthodox, and so I was already used to doing certain things like going to see people in the hospital and things like this. And he said, you don't have to be ordained clergy to go visit people in the hospital, to check up on your fellow parishioners, to organize charitable work within the parish. Like, as a layman, you just go get a blessing and do these things. Obviously, as a deacon, you better get a blessing and do these things. But still, priesthood or no priesthood, I mean, this is the Church of God, and you have if you're a man and you're watching this, even if you're not in the position to do those things, maybe you're not canonically eligible or something else, you can still take some of the burden of the parish on your shoulders by becoming the hands and feet of Christ. And that would be that would just be my encouragement to anyone watching this. Something I really appreciated about the diaconal formation program that we have in the OCA is that at the last practicum I went to, we sat down and actually just kind of had an open table, sort of round table forum discussion with the chancellor of my diocese and with Father Kirill, who's in charge of the diaconal program for the OCA, and some other folks, including one then deacon who's now a bishop, and talking about this historic role that deacons have always had in being involved in the charitable works in their parish, and basically saying, listen, we've not been very good at this historically as the OCA, and we can do better. So what are they doing in your parish? Let's start sharing ideas. And I came away with 100 wonderful things that I was like, okay, well, if God ever grants that I'm able to be a deacon and I get a blessing, these are the things that I want to go and do. So all of those things you can do, take some pressure off of your priest, even if you're not ordained, even if you don't even want to be ordained. You can still be involved in those things. I mean, it's the priest is not some professional, it's like you've got your auto mechanic and you've got your lawyer and you've got your doctor and you've got your priest, right? He is the father of his community. Right. You're his son. You're a member of his family. So do your chores.
Yep. Okay. So we've just hit 2 hours in this conversation, which seems like it's floated by flown right by. Real quick question. Do we need, our seminaries basically dinosaurs that we should just, sell them and move on with our lives? No. Or is there, what do we need to do with the seminaries real quick?
Yeah. So the seminaries are not, they're not dinosaurs. They're from an older model. They still have relevance. I think they have relevance in 3 important ways. One is that the people who go to seminary right now, tend to be younger cradle men or recent converts. And when I say recent convert, if you've been Orthodox 8 years, you're a recent convert in my book. Okay, I'm sorry.
Phew.
10, if it's in the last 15 years, you're kind of pushing recent. But if it's like in the last decade, you are a very recent convert, right? The chrism is still not quite dry. So I think that those are the people who tend to go to seminary. You don't typically have middle-aged cradle men or long-term convert men. Like, those guys generally don't go to seminary anyway, right? Yeah. That's the market inefficiency. So seminaries are still important in training those guys who need that intensive formation. There are men who have had a different kind of formation that have been Orthodox a long time, and formation is different. They're better formed in many ways than a guy who spends 3 years at a seminary. But for those other categories, seminary is still very relevant. Chaplains, a lot of times you need an MDiv to be able to have chaplaincy privileges and so forth. So that's an important feature. And frankly, if we were really firing on all cylinders, we would be producing a ton of chaplains because there's a need for those. So, if we got our act together. And then I think most importantly, I think seminaries should be leading the way in facilitating these solutions to what we're talking about. I'm not suggesting that this happen outside of the framework of the seminaries.
They're already in the trenches working on the problem. Exactly. Okay. All right. So this discussion is about what does Orthodoxy in America look like in 15 years? What does Orthodoxy in America look like in 2040? So let's just do kind of like a lightning round here. Our current bishops in America, there's, 50, 55 of them, something like this. What happens in 2040? Is it the same group of guys, so
if you go back 15 years, go back to 2010, 60% of those bishops are no longer active. Today, the average age of American Orthodox bishops is 65. Wow. Only 6 of them are under the age of 50.
Wow.
So Yeah, there will be an enormous amount of turnover, probably 60 to 70% turnover of our hierarchy.
So like, how old are the primates of some of the biggest jurisdictions? Like, so we can think about what they're going to look like at that
now,
age.
we actually might not have as much turnover at the primatial level. Depends. Metropolitan Saba will be 81, so he very well could still be active, depending on various things. Metropolitan Tikhon of the OCA will be 74. So very likely to, good possibility he's still active. Archbishop Elpidophoros of the Greek Archdiocese will be 73. Metropolitan Nicholas of Rocor will only be 66. So the primates might not change a whole lot in the next 15
I personally am praying for at least one of them to be preserved for many years on a regular basis. So,
so clearly I'm sure that's going to work. Okay, so we talked a lot about population, and there's population shifts going on in America. Give me the short and sweet. What are we looking at in terms of the population shifts of Orthodox America in 15 years? We talked about this a little bit, but let's just kind of recap and maybe push it a little bit.
Yeah. So as far as population growth goes, the areas that are growing to continue to grow. As I mentioned, the Sun Belt migration is the most important thing that's happening in terms of population shifts in America right now. So that's a place to look. The other places that are really growing by the numbers are those Mormon Belt states that I mentioned. And those are states in which Orthodoxy is very underrepresented by the numbers. So again, if I were looking, send some missionaries out, maybe that would be something to think about. For the last several decades, Orthodox Christians have represented roughly 0.5% of the U.S. population. That is still the case for older age ranges, such as boomers and Gen X. But for Gen Z, the Orthodox percentage is around 1% and growing. So which means that Orthodox Christians are twice as prevalent in Gen Z as in the boomer, Gen X, and millennial generation.
So let's think about that. So if Zoomers right now are like in their mid 20s, a little bit younger, they're in their 20s basically right now. So add 15 years to that, then they're all in their mid 30s to their early 40s.
And they're having
this is the workforce now of our parishes.
And
older young adults.
Yeah, those people are having kids. Conservatively, we're looking at 2.77 million Orthodox Christians by 2040, which would be a 69% increase. 1.13 million new Orthodox Christians the next 15 years, and a real need to found at least 1,300 new parishes to make sure that they are given the pastoral care that they need. That's the short version. That's I think a very modest version. I think that you could make it. Yeah, Matthew's like, say the bigger number, but
no, I mean,
anyway,
scare them all.
But even the conservative number is a big boost. I mean,
it's huge. Yeah. I think. I mean, my prediction is that we're not going to meet that. I don't think we're going to meet that, and so what there is going to be a lot more pressure before we really realize this needs to be something we're really truly working on,
and we will need
in a concerted way.
And we will need lots of prayer. We will need God's grace. As I mentioned before, except the Lord builds the house, they've labored in vain. And everything that we're doing, I just want to say, first of all, we have a hierarchical church. Anything that's being done has to be blessed. This isn't just like, Father Andrew going rogue, inviting crazy Matthew Namee and the numbers dude, out onto, but I mean, it's that's a fun band name, but it's just the case that we have to serve the church with the gifts that we have. And, this is very important stuff. I mean, to me, this is nothing short of, the salvation of souls. This is the grand conspiracy of which I am a proud member, to make the entire world Orthodox.
Yeah, I think one thing that we should underline is, for decades, one of the big questions in founding a mission has been, will it survive? Will anyone come?
Absolutely.
And now we're at a point where we have really actually gone now to the field of dreams thing. If you build it, they will come.
Yes. Actually, that adage which you super hate, Father Andrew, that come and see, could actually work right now. So start building pretty churches.
I hate the way we're using it.
But anyway, could actually work. Start building.
Okay.
Start building.
So now tying a number of these threads together, what does seminary look like in the future? Where if you're going to give your recommendations, Matthew, You've thought a lot about this now for years. I know, because I've had these conversations with you for years. What are we looking at? Where do we want to be going?
The overwhelming majority of our priests being produced in 15 years will not be coming out of the 3 seminary institution locations. Okay, I'm not saying the seminaries aren't involved. Those 3 locations will not be producing most of our priests. The overwhelming, because we just need to produce so many. And so we are going to have, we're going to start tapping into that market inefficiency. And the key question is going to be how organized is our process of tapping into that market inefficiency of those other guys that aren't going to seminary. And so I think in 15 years, if we can get our act together, we will have more locally and regionally focused programs. My hope and my prayer is that we are making men wait much longer before they become priests, and have much more robust training than we're currently doing, which I hope strengthens our communities. And I think that if we can do that effectively, we will have probably a lot more bivocational priests, a lot more parishes with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 priests, or maybe they've got like the main parish and then some satellite chapels that are being served that aren't full-fledged parishes. Yeah,
this is a thing. This is a thing worth pointing out. There are now multiple churches in the United States that have secondary locations with basically it's another completely functioning Orthodox church, but one parish council that governs multiple communities. The priest at the original mother church is the senior, and the other ones are obedient to him. There's one pot of money that governs all of these communities. This is a model, and I think we need to be doing it more and more, because what it does is it actually extends stability, and it's not like, good luck, kids. I hope everything works out okay with that mission,
So I think we're going to start seeing like the things we've taken for granted for 50 odd years, 70 years are starting to falter and fall away. And I think what hopefully is replacing that in an organic way, but in an intentional way, is something like we're talking about, where you have, lots more priests, but they're more locally rooted communities that have sort of tentacles, maybe out into the suburbs, into other areas. Branches, yeah. And tentacles is a bad one, yeah. And so that I think is the way. How are we going to get to 1,300 more locations? I don't think we're going to get 1,300 missions. We could get 1,300 locations. That's a different question. Could we add 1,300 liturgies? I think we could. I think that's much more doable, but it requires more priests. The key is getting more priests.
Yeah. Well, it's been a heck of a discussion, and the chat for this conversation has been absolutely on fire. So thank you very much, everyone. That's going to wrap it up. So humanly speaking, right, some doom and gloom, a little doom and gloom for sure, maybe a lot, I don't know. But also some very, very bright reasons to hope. And of course, no matter what, our hope is in Jesus Christ. And we are called to be faithful, amen. Whatever the conditions of the world are. So thank you both for this mountain of work that you've presented in this very concise way. Matthew, Deacon Seraphim.
Thank you, Father.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you, everyone who tuned in today, especially those who joined us live on YouTube. This has been a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.